Hello YouTube, thanks for tuning in. If you saw my last video on this product, you know it died after about a month of riding. Here I am powering it up and turning on the remote, and as you can see, nothing happens. It goes into a protection mode with flashing white light. So after sitting on it for a couple months, decided to take it apart, remove the axle and the control module and open it up so I can see if I could repair it. The plan is to replace the axle with the one from this newer board along with any broken components, swapping them out and taking the battery so that I can wire it in parallel with the battery on the other board to address one of my primary concerns with the board at this point, and that is the range, or the lack of. Having to carry the charger around sucks. So by wiring two batteries in parallel, I should in theory be able to double the range, and that would be great. And the other issue I found with this out of the box is the three non-drive wheels are smaller than the motor, so the motor wears unevenly. It's 73.61 millimeters on the outside diameter, and the inside diameter of the wheel is 71.87 millimeters. That is a difference of 1.73 millimeters of additional wear on the inside of the motor, simply because the three non-drive wheels are smaller out of the box. So the force coming off of the board is not being distributed evenly onto the wheels from the axle, be it that one wheel is smaller. The axle rides at an angle, so there is a horizontal load being applied across the axle. Now the simplest way for me to explain that is that the wheel is getting pinched between the road and the axle, so there's a horizontal force or load. Now I didn't design the motor and I'm not the expert, but I don't think it's supposed to have a load in that direction. So here I am bringing in the old board and taking it apart. There are 4 Phillips machine screws and 4 8mm locking nuts holding the axle on, and a similar setup holding the controller box, with the addition of 4 washers to keep the plastic from getting marred or crushed. And then there are 8 Phillips machine screws holding this plastic shroud onto the cast housing. Contains all of our electronics and the batteries. I started disconnecting everything at this point, so that I could do some testing on the different components. But first I decided to replace the new wheels with the new wheels, but I hadn't bought any bearings, so it was necessary for me to swap them out simply by pushing them out with various tools. Whatever you have is my first time swapping out bearings, and it's a pretty straightforward process. Don't forget to put your spacer back in, and the outer diameter on these wheels match the outer diameter of the motor, so I won't get any of that weird wear that was happening, which resulted in a pretty bad failure of the motor, I'll call it. A simple tap gets the bearings back in. Now here I am removing the shroud of the new controller, and I start to disconnect everything so that I can proceed to testing. After disconnecting the new battery, I connected the old one to the new ESC and the new motor, powered up the board and the remote to see what would happen. And as you can see, everything runs smooth, sounds great. So I disconnect the old battery and I disconnect the new axle from the new ESC, and I bring in the old ESC and connect it to the new axle along with one of the batteries, and I power it up to see what happens. Yeah, as you can see, it's not very spectacular, so something inside of the older ESC has definitely failed or blown up. So I disconnect everything. Some of these bullet connectors are a little harder than others, and I brought in the new ESC along with the old axle, connected everything together along with one of the batteries to see what would happen. Power up the remote, and eventually remember to power up the board. And it runs, but it doesn't run well. It sounds like a damn sewing machine, and I believe that's as a result of that transaxle loading I was describing earlier. So we'll avoid that with the new wheels, the new wheels. And here I am opening up the battery pack, removing the heat shrink, being careful not to mar any of the heat shrink on the batteries. I don't want to do that or have to apply additional heat shrink. It'd be hard with them in the pack as it is. And I'm just laying it out and mocking things up in my mind mocking, yep, just having my first initial considerations for the modifications that you will see in some of the upcoming videos. There are quite a few parts. In the next one, I think it is, you'll see me making a whole bunch of mess of this thing before I get any progress, because you see here how tight everything is. This 10 gauge wire will not fit. It's the only wire I have, so it's what I gotta use, and I gotta bust out the die grinder in order to address these screw columns or pillars and make a channel in which to route the wires. Until then, thanks for watching.